You're standing at 28,000 feet on Mount Everest. You've been climbing for 2 months. You're 300 meters from the summit, so close you can see the prayer flags at the top. And then you see it, a line, a queue. Hundreds of people, dressed in bright red, yellow, blue and orange climbing suits, standing single file on a narrow ridge, barely wide enough for one person, waiting. You check your oxygen gauge. You have maybe 3 hours left. The summit is 90 minutes away in normal conditions, but this isn't normal. This is a traffic jam at 28,000 feet in the death zone, where every minute you stand still, your body is dying. You watch the line. It's not moving. People are sitting in the snow. Some are lying down. You can't tell if they're resting or dead. Your guide radio's base camp. How long is the wait? The response crackles back. 2 to 4 hours, maybe more. You do the math. If you wait 4 hours, you'll run out of oxygen before reaching the summit. If you run out of oxygen, you'll die. But if you turn back now, after spending $100,000, after training for a year, after coming so close, you'll never forgive yourself. What do you do? This isn't hypothetical. This is May 22nd, 2019, the deadliest traffic jam in Mount Everest history. Over 200 people queued on a ridge barely 3 feet wide, waiting their turn to climb a single oxygen, freezing, exhausting themselves, and dying. 4 people died that day. 11 died that week, not from avalanches, not from falls, from waiting in line. This is the story of the Everest traffic jam. How commercialization turned the world's highest mountain into a theme park ride. How overcrowding killed 11 people in 7 days. And how the climbing industry prioritized profit over safety and got away with it. This is that story. May 22, 2019 started like any other summit day on Mount Everest. Climbers woke at Camp 4, the South Col, 26,000 feet, around midnight. They strapped on their oxygen masks, checked their gear, and began the final push to the summit. The plan was simple: climb through the night, summit at sunrise, and descend before the afternoon heat made conditions dangerous. But this wasn't any other summit day. This was the culmination of a record-breaking season. Nepal had issued 381 climbing permits in 2019, the most in Everest's history. Combined with guides and Sherpas, that meant over 800 people were attempting to summit during the narrow weather window in mid-May, and all of them were climbing the same route, on the same day, toward the same bottleneck. By 6 a.m., climbers approaching the summit ridge encountered something shocking: a line, hundreds of people, queued single file on the southeast ridge, waiting to ascend a section called the Hillary Step, a nearly vertical 40-foot rock face just below the summit. The Hillary Step is a natural bottleneck. Only one person can climb it at a time. In a typical season, with 150 climbers attempting the summit over a week-long window, this creates minor delays, maybe 15-20 minutes. But 2019 wasn't typical. With over 200 people attempting to summit on the same day, the Hillary Step became a choke point, and the line stretched hundreds of meters down the ridge. Climbers reported waiting 2 to 4 hours to move forward. Some waited longer, and during that time, they were standing or sitting at 28,000 plus feet in the death zone, where the human body cannot survive indefinitely. Nirmal Purja, a Nepali mountaineer and former British Gurkha soldier, took a photo of the traffic jam. The image showed a long, snaking line of climbers in brightly colored suits, queued on a narrow ridge with sheer drops on both sides. The summit was visible in the background, tantalizingly close, but impossibly far. Purya posted the photo on Instagram with the caption, "Death Zone, not a place for humans, survival mode." The photo went viral. Within hours, it had been shared millions of times. News outlets around the world ran the story. Everest traffic jam, climbers wait in line to summit. The image became iconic, a symbol of what Everest had become. not a challenge for elite mountaineers, but a tourist attraction where people paid $50,000, $100,000 to stand in line and take a summit selfie. But the traffic jam wasn't just embarrassing, it was deadly. The first death. Ravi Thakar. Ravi Thakar was a 28-year-old Indian climber. He'd trained for 2 years, saved money working as a police constable in Kolkata, and on May 22nd, he was living his dream, climbing Mount Everest. Ravi reached the traffic jam around 7 a.m. He waited and waited. His oxygen gauge dropped. He radioed his guide. "I'm running low on oxygen. How much longer?" The response, "Stay in line. We'll reach the summit soon." But soon turned into hours. By 10:30 a.m., Ravi had been standing in the queue for 3 hours. His oxygen tank was nearly empty. He was shivering, disoriented, and his guide wasn't with him. Guides were managing multiple clients, spread across the line, unable to stay with any single person. Around 11 a.m., climbers near Ravi noticed he'd sat down in the snow. They asked if he was okay. He didn't respond. Someone checked his oxygen tank, empty. They tried to share their own oxygen, but they were running low too. And moving Ravi, getting him out of line down the mountain, would require multiple people, all of whom would miss the summit. So they radioed for help and kept climbing. By the time rescue Sherpas reached Ravi, he was unconscious. They attempted to revive him, gave him oxygen, tried to wake him, but it was too late. Ravi Thakar died at 28,200 feet, sitting in a line waiting for his turn to summit. His body remained on the mountain for days. Climbers stepped over him on their way up and down. Some took photos, others averted their eyes, but no one stopped for long, because stopping meant losing your place in line, and losing your place in line meant missing the summit. The second death. Kalpana Das was a 52-year-old Indian climber. She'd summited several 8,000-meter peaks. She was experienced, strong, prepared. And on May 22nd, she successfully reached the summit of Everest. But the traffic jam meant she'd spent over 4 hours in the death zone, far longer than planned. She was exhausted, her oxygen was depleted, and on the descent, at approximately 7,500 feet, she collapsed. Her Sherpas tried to help her. They shared oxygen, tried to get her to stand, radioed for rescue, but Kalpana was too weak. Her body had been in the death zone too long, her organs were shutting down. Kalpana Das died at 7,500 feet, just hours after achieving her dream of summiting Everest. Her body was later recovered and brought down to base camp, one of the few bodies evacuated that season. The third death. Donald Lynn Cash. Donald Cash was a 55-year-old American climber from Utah. He'd been planning his Everest attempt for 5 years. And on May 22nd, he summited successfully. But like Kalpana Das, the traffic jam had cost him hours. He burned through his oxygen reserves, and on the descent, his body gave out. Cash collapsed near the balcony, 27,600 feet. He was still conscious but unable to move. His Sherpas stayed with him, trying to keep him alive, but Cash's condition deteriorated rapidly. He suffered what appeared to be a heart attack, likely caused by the prolonged exposure to extreme altitude. Donald Cash died at 27,600 feet. His body remained on the mountain. The fourth death. Anjali Kulkarni. Anjali Kulkarni was a 55-year-old Indian climber. She'd reached the traffic jam around 8 a.m. She waited for over 3 hours, and during that time, her oxygen tank ran dry. Anjali tried to continue without oxygen, a catastrophically bad decision, but one made by a brain that was already oxygen-deprived and incapable of rational thought. She made it another 100 meters before collapsing. Climbers found her sitting in the snow. They offered oxygen, but it was too late. Anjali Kulkarni died at 28,000 feet, just 300 meters from the summit she'd waited 3 hours to reach. 4 deaths. 1 day, one cause, the traffic jam. But the deaths didn't stop on May 22nd. Over the next 5 days, 7 more climbers died, bringing the week's total to 11 deaths, most from exhaustion, hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, all linked to overcrowding and the traffic jam. And the world watched in horror as Mount Everest, once a symbol of human achievement, became a symbol of human greed, poor planning, and the deadly consequences of turning a mountain into a business. Mount Everest wasn't always this crowded. In 1953, when Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay made the first successful summit, Everest was an expedition, a multi-year project involving dozens of people, extensive planning, and significant risk. Only the world's best climbers attempted it, and most failed. By the 1970s and 1980s, Everest was still reserved for elite mountaineers. Summiting required years of high-altitude experience, technical climbing skills, and the physical and mental toughness to survive in the death zone. Between 1953 and 1989, only about 300 people had summited Everest. It was exclusive, dangerous, respected, but in the 1990s, something changed. Adventure tourism companies realized there was a market for guided Everest expeditions. Wealthy clients with minimal climbing experience were willing to pay enormous sums, $50,000, $70,000, eventually $100,000 plus, to be guided to the summit by professional mountaineers and Sherpas. The pitch was simple. You don't need to be an elite climber. You just need to be fit, determined, and willing to pay. We'll do the rest. And it worked. By the mid-1990s, multiple companies were offering guided Everest expeditions. By the 2000s, dozens of companies. By 2019, over 50 companies were operating on Everest, each taking multiple clients. The result? Everest became accessible to anyone with money, and the numbers exploded. 1990, 126 people summited Everest. 2000, 142 people summited. 2010, 513 people summited. 2019, the routes didn't get wider, 876 people summited, longer, a record, and the mountain didn't but the infrastructure safer. Didn't grow. The role with the of demand. Nepal's government. Nepal's economy depends heavily on tourism. Everest climbing permits generate over $11 million USD annually for the Nepali government. Each permit costs $11,000 per person. In 2019, with 381 permits issued, Nepal earned $4.2 million just from permits. Additional fees and taxes for a small, impoverished nation higher. This revenue is significant, and the Nepali government has a financial incentive to issue as many permits as possible. But more permits mean more climbers. More climbers mean more overcrowding. More overcrowding means more deaths. And more deaths mean international criticism, negative media coverage, and pressure to limit permits. Nepal is caught in a dilemma. Restrict permits to improve safety, but lose millions in revenue. Or keep issuing permits, accept the deaths, and hope the backlash isn't too severe. So far, Nepal has chosen the latter. After the 2019 deaths, there were calls for Nepal to cap permits at 200 per season, require proof of high-altitude climbing experience, summiting at least one 7,000-meter peak, stagger summit, attempts to avoid everyone climbing on the same day. Nepal implemented minor reforms. As of 2020, climbers must provide proof of experience on at least one peak above 6,500 meters. But the reforms are weakly enforced, and permit numbers continue to rise. In 2023, Nepal issued 478 permits, 97 more than the deadly 2019 season. The role of climbing companies. Climbing companies and in a competitive market, they compete for companies that are too strict, that turn away unqualified clients, that enforce turnaround times, that prioritize safety over summits, lose business to companies that are more lenient. This creates a race to the bottom. Companies that promise high summit success rates attract more clients. And to achieve high success rates, they accept less experienced climbers who pay the same as experienced climbers, push clients to continue even when conditions are dangerous. minimize the risks in marketing materials. Some companies are ethical. They enforce strict safety standards. They turn back clients who aren't performing well. They prioritize survival over summits. But these companies are the minority. Most companies prioritize profit. And when your clients have paid $100,000 to summit Everest, there's enormous pressure to get them to the top, even when it's dangerous, even when they should turn back, even when people are dying in line. The role of clients. But the companies alone aren't to blame. The clients, the people paying for these expeditions, also share responsibility. Many clients overestimate their abilities. They believe fitness is enough. But Everest requires mental toughness, technical skills, and the ability to make rational decisions under extreme stress. Underestimate the risks. Marketing materials show summit success rates, often inflated, but downplay death rates. Ignore warnings. Guides tell clients to turn back. Clients refuse because they've paid $100,000 and they're not leaving without a summit. In 2019, multiple guides reported clients refusing to turn back despite being told they were moving too slowly, running low on oxygen, or showing signs of altitude sickness. The client's reasoning, I didn't pay $100,000 to quit. And this attitude, treating Everest as a purchased product rather than a dangerous mountain, has created a culture where summiting is expected, where turning back is seen as failure, where death is an acceptable risk as long as it happens to someone else. The perfect storm. The 2019 traffic jam came from overlapping failures. 381 permits meant 800-plus climbers chasing a 4 to 5 day weather window. Companies pushed everyone to summit May 21-23. Routes, ropes, and ladders built for 100-150 had to handle 800. There were no strict turnaround rules or enforced experience limits. With strong financial incentives for Nepal, companies and clients, safety warnings were ignored. A deadly, predictable, and preventable disaster. But it happened anyway, because money matters more than safety, because clients demand summits, because Nepal needs revenue, because companies need profits, and because no one wants to be the one to say Everest should be closed to commercial climbing. So the traffic jams continue, the deaths continue, and the world watches, horrified but fascinated, as Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, becomes a graveyard built on greed. The Hillary Step is named after Sir Edmund Hillary, who, along with Tenzing Norgay, was the first to climb it in 1953. It's a nearly vertical 40-foot rock face, located at approximately 28,139 feet, just 200 feet below the summit. It's the final technical challenge before reaching the top of Everest. The Hillary Step was considered the crux of the summit push. Climbers had to ascend the near-vertical rock using fixed ropes, ice axes, and crampons. It required strength, technique, and nerve, and it was slow. Only one person could climb at a time. In a typical season, with 100-150 climbers spread over a week-long summit window, the Hillary Step caused minor delays. You'd wait 10-15 minutes for the person ahead of you to finish climbing. Then it was your turn, not ideal but manageable. But in 2019, with over 200 people attempting to summit on the same day, the Hillary Step became a choke point, a bottleneck, a death trap. The geology of the problem. The Hillary Step was partially destroyed during the 2015 Nepal earthquake. The earthquake, magnitude 7.8, caused massive damage across Nepal, killing nearly 9,000 people. On Everest, the quake triggered avalanches that killed 19 people at base camp and damaged climbing routes, including the Hillary Step. The rock face partially collapsed, creating a new, slightly less vertical but more unstable route. Some climbers argue this made the step easier, others argue it made it more dangerous. The rock is now loose, crumbling, and unpredictable. Either way, the fundamental problem remained. Only one person can climb at a time. And in 2019, that single-file bottleneck created a traffic jam that stretched hundreds of meters down the southeast ridge. The Death Zone Q climbers approaching the Hillary Step on May 22, 2019, described the scene as surreal. I saw the line from 500 meters away. I thought it was a rope trick, an optical illusion. But as I got closer, I realized those are people, hundreds of people, standing in a line. On the side of Mount Everest, Climber Testimony 2019. The line wasn't moving. People were sitting down. Some were lying in the snow. I couldn't tell who was resting and who was dying. Climber Testimony 2019. I waited 3 hours. 3 hours standing at 28,000 feet. I watched my oxygen gauge drop 80%, 60%, 40%, and I thought, I'm going to die waiting in this line. Climber Testimony 2019. The psychological impact of waiting in the death zone is devastating. Every minute you spend above 26,000 feet, your body is consuming itself. Cells are dying, organs are failing, and there's nothing you can do about it. Climbers reported panic attacks. I couldn't breathe. The mask felt like it was suffocating me. I wanted to rip it off. Despair. I thought, I'm going to die here, in a line. Waiting to climb a stupid rock. Rage. People were sitting down, blocking the route. I wanted to scream at them, push them off the mountain. Dissociation. It stopped feeling real. I felt like I was watching a movie, people dying around me, and I just didn't care. And all of this was happening at an altitude where rational thought is nearly impossible. Hypoxia impairs judgment. Climbers who should have turned back kept waiting. Climbers who ran out of oxygen kept climbing. Climbers who saw others collapsing kept moving forward because the summit was right there, just past the Hillary Step, just 200 feet away, and they'd waited 3 hours. They weren't turning back now. The prospective Sherpas working on Everest in 2019 were horrified by the traffic jam. They'd seen overcrowding before, but never like this, and they knew this was going to kill people. Angdorje Sherpa, a veteran guide with over 20 Everest summits, described the scene. I told my clients, we need to turn back. This is too dangerous, but they refused. They said, we paid $100,000, we're summiting, and I couldn't force them. So I stayed, and I watched people die. Sherpas are caught in an impossible position. They're hired to guide clients to the summit. But they're also responsible for keeping clients alive. And when clients refuse to turn back despite obvious danger, what can a Sherpa do? If the Sherpa abandons the client will likely die, and the Sherpa will be blamed. If the Sherpa stays, both might die. And if the Sherpa forces the client to descend, the client will complain, demand refunds, and leave negative reviews that could cost the Sherpa future work. So most Sherpas stay. They do their best to keep clients alive, and they watch, helpless, as the mountain kills people who should never have been there in the first place. The rescue impossibility. When climbers collapsed in the traffic jam, rescue was nearly impossible, because the line was so dense, so tightly packed, that moving a body, dead or alive, required dozens of people to shift, to make space, to coordinate. And at 28,000 feet, coordination is nearly impossible. Everyone is hypoxic, everyone is exhausted, everyone is focused on their own survival. So collapsed climbers were often just left, stepped over, moved around, treated as obstacles rather than people, because the alternative, stopping the entire line, organizing a rescue, carrying someone down through hundreds of other climbers, was logistically impossible. The viral photo, Nirmal Purja's photo of the traffic jam, became one of the most iconic images of Everest. It was shared on news sites, social media, documentaries, and educational materials worldwide. It became a symbol of what Everest had become, a commercialized, overcrowded tourist trap where people pay to stand in line and die. But the photo also sparked outrage. People who'd never climbed a mountain, who'd never heard of the Hillary Step, saw that image and understood instantly, something is very wrong here. and the pressure mounted on Nepal, on climbing companies, on the entire Everest industry, to fix the problem, to prevent future traffic jams, to stop the deaths. But fixing it would require limiting permits, enforcing safety standards, prioritizing survival over summits, and that would cost money, a lot of money. So Nepal made minor reforms, companies promised better safety protocols, and climbers kept paying, kept climbing, kept dying, because the Hillary step, the bottleneck that kills, will always be there. And as long as hundreds of people tried to climb it on the same day, the traffic jams will continue, and people will keep dying, waiting their turn, in line. On the side of Mount Everest, 11 people died on Mount Everest between May 20th, 26, 2019. Here are their stories. 1. Ravi Thakkar, India, 28 years old. Ravi was a police constable from Kolkata. He'd dreamed of climbing Everest since childhood. He saved money for years, living frugally, skipping luxuries, setting aside every rupee he could. His family thought he was crazy. Why spend so much money to climb a mountain? But Ravi was determined. He trained for 2 years, summited smaller peaks in the Himalayas to gain experience, and in 2019 he finally had enough money to join an expedition. Ravi died waiting in the traffic jam on May 22nd. He ran out of oxygen, sat down in the snow, and never stood up again. His mother, Pushpa Devi, said in an interview, "He called me before the summit attempt. He was so excited. He said, 'Ma, tomorrow I'll be on top of the world.' And I said, 'Be safe, come home.' He never came home." 2. Kalpana Das, India, 52 years old. Kalpana was an experienced mountaineer. She'd summited multiple 8,000-meter peaks. She was strong, fit, and prepared. But the traffic jam exhausted her. After summiting, she collapsed on the descent and died at 27,500 feet. Her husband, Rajesh Das, said, "Kalpana lived for the mountains. She died doing what she loved, but she should have turned back. The traffic jam killed her, and that's something I'll never forgive." 3. Donald Lynn Cash, USA, 55 years old. Donald was from Utah. He'd been planning his Everest attempt for 5 years. He was a real estate agent, a father of 3, summited successfully, and a passionate but died climber of apparent cardiac arrest on the descent. His daughter, Emily Cash, said, "Dad always said, the summit is only halfway." He knew the descent was the most dangerous part, but he was exhausted from waiting in line. His body just gave out. 4. Anjali Kulkarni, India, 55 years old. Anjali ran out of oxygen waiting in the traffic jam. She tried to continue without it. She collapsed 300 meters from the summit and died. Her son, Aditya Kulkarni, said, "My mother was stubborn. She didn't want to turn back. She said, 'I'm so close, I can make it.' But she couldn't. And now she's gone." 5. Nihal Bhagwan, India, 27 years old. Nihal died on May 20th, before the main traffic jam. But his death was linked to overcrowding. He'd been delayed by slower climbers ahead of him, which meant he summited late and descended in darkness. He slipped on ice and fell 6. Dipankar Ghosh, India, 55 years old. Dipankar died on May 21st. He summited successfully but became disoriented on the descent. He wandered off route and fell into a crevasse. His body was never recovered. 7. Ernst Landgraf, Austria, 65 years old. Ernst was the oldest climber to die during the 2019 season. He collapsed near the balcony, 27,600 feet, on May 21st. He'd been waiting in heavy traffic earlier in the climb. He suffered apparent and the delays exhausted him. 8. Christopher John Coolish, USA, 62 years old. Christopher summited on May 27th after the main traffic jam, but died on the descent. He collapsed near Camp 4 and died of apparent altitude sickness. His brother, Mark Coolish, said, "Chris achieved his dream. He stood on top of Everest, but the mountain took him anyway." 9. Seema Goswami, India, 50 years old. Seema died on May 23rd. She'd been caught in the traffic jam the previous day, but summited successfully. On the descent, she collapsed from exhaustion and never recovered. 10. Unnamed Nepali Sherpa, age unknown. A Sherpa died on May 24th while assisting clients. His name was not widely reported. His death received minimal media coverage. This is common. Sherpa deaths are often underreported, treated as footnotes rather than tragedies. Gyaltsen Sherpa, Nepal, 37 years old. Gyaltsen was an experienced Sherpa with multiple Everest summits. He died on May 26 after summiting with a client. He collapsed during the descent and died at 27,800 feet. His wife, Yangchen Sherpa, said, "Gyaltsen knew the risks, but he had no choice. Guiding is how we survive, how we feed our family, and I'm left with 2 children and no income." The pattern. All 11 deaths share common factors: overcrowding, delays caused by traffic jams, exhausted climbers, oxygen depletion, waiting in line burned through limited oxygen supplies, poor decision-making, hypoxia, impaired judgment. Climbers continued when they should have turned back. Descent fatigue. Most died descending after summiting when exhaustion was at its peak, and most were experienced climbers. They weren't reckless tourists. They'd trained, prepared, followed safety protocols, but the traffic jam killed them anyway. The families' anger. The families of the 11 who died were united in their fury. They blamed Nepal for issuing too many permits. They blamed climbing companies for prioritizing profits over safety. And they blamed the Everest industry for treating their loved ones as revenue sources rather than human beings. Several families filed lawsuits. Most were dismissed. Nepali law protects the government and climbing companies from liability. Climbers sign waivers acknowledging the risks, and judges ruled that the deaths, while tragic, were the result of personal choices, not negligence. But the families disagreed. "My son didn't die because he made bad choices." Pushpa Devi, Ravi Thakur's mother, said, "He died because Nepal let 800 people climb on the same day. That's not risk. That's murder." The memorial at Everest Base Camp. A memorial wall lists the names of climbers who've died on the mountain. After the 2019 season, 11 new names were added. Plaques, photos, prayer flags. Families visited, laid flowers, wept, and asked the same question: why? Why did they die? Why didn't anyone stop this? And the answer, uncomfortable, infuriating, true, is because stopping it would cost money, and money matters more than lives. The 11 who died in 2019 are not statistics. They're people, with families, dreams, lives cut short by greed, overcrowding, and a system that prioritizes profit over survival. And they won't be the last, because nothing has fundamentally changed. The permits keep being issued, the climbers keep coming, and the mountain keeps killing, and we keep watching. Nirmal Purja's photo of the Everest traffic jam wasn't just a picture, it was a revelation. A single image that exposed what Everest had become. And it went viral for one simple reason: it was impossible to misinterpret. You didn't need to be a climber to understand what you were seeing. You didn't need to know about the death zone, the Hillary step, or high-altitude physiology. The photo told a simple, horrifying story: hundreds of people standing in line to die. The image showed a narrow ridge, barely 3 feet wide, sheer drops on both sides, thousands of feet, a line of climbers stretching hundreds of meters, bright-colored suits creating a surreal, almost cartoonish contrast against the white snow. People sitting, lying, waiting, the summit visible in the background, so close, yet impossibly far for those stuck in line. Within 24 hours of being posted on Instagram, the photo had been shared over 50 million times. It appeared on the front pages of the New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, CNN, and hundreds of other news outlets. It trended on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. It was discussed on talk shows, news programs, podcasts, and the reaction was universal: shock, horror, and outrage. The photo's comment section exploded: "This is insane. They're literally queuing to die." Everest has become Disneyland, except people die waiting for the ride. If you die waiting in line on a mountain, maybe you deserved it. This comment was heavily criticized. This is what capitalism does, turns everything, even mountains, into commodities. Nepal needs to shut this down. This is negligent homicide. The comments revealed a cultural divide. Some blamed the climbers for paying to be there, for not turning back. Others blamed Nepal for issuing too many permits, and still others blamed the climbing industry for commercializing Everest. But almost everyone agreed this should not be happening. The media frenzy. The photo triggered a global media investigation into Everest's commercialization. Journalists interviewed climbers, Sherpas, government officials, and industry insiders, and what they uncovered was damning. Finding 1. Nepal prioritizes revenue over safety. Internal documents revealed that Nepal's government had discussed capping permits at 300 per season to reduce overcrowding, but the proposal was rejected because it would cost the government $880,000 in annual revenue. Finding 2. Climbing companies downplay promotional materials from multiple companies promised 90% summit success rates, without mentioning that 1 in 60 climbers who attempt Everest die. They advertised Everest as achievable for anyone with determination, while omitting the fact that most deaths occur among inexperienced climbers. Finding 3. Experience requirements are rarely enforced. While Nepal theoretically requires proof of high-altitude experience, the requirements are loosely defined and poorly enforced. Many climbers submit fake certificates or climb a single 6,500 millimeter peak and claim they're ready for Everest. Finding 4. Sherpas bear disproportionate risk. Between 2004-2019, Sherpas accounted for 34% of Everest deaths, despite representing only 20% of climbers. They die setting ropes, rescuing clients, carrying loads, and they're paid a fraction of what Western guides earn. Finding 5. Multiple experts system is designed to fail. Everest's current infrastructure, fixed ropes, camps, bottlenecks, was designed for 100-150 climbers per season. With 800-plus climbers, the system is overwhelmed. And yet, no significant infrastructure improvements have been made. The backlash. The photo and subsequent investigations triggered backlash against Nepal's government. Activists protested in Kathmandu, demanding permit caps, stricter safety regulations, and better treatment of Sherpas. Climbing companies. Several companies faced boycotts. Clients cancelled bookings. Insurance companies raised premiums. The climbers themselves. Social media users shamed climbers who'd been in the 2019 traffic jam, accusing them of prioritizing ego over lives. But the backlash was short-lived. Within weeks, the news cycle moved on, and by 2020, the climbing industry was back to business as usual. Nirmal Purja's response. Nirmal Purja, the photographer, became an unexpected spokesman for Everest reform. He gave dozens of interviews advocating for permit caps, better infrastructure, and Sherpa rights. But Purja also faced criticism. Some accused him of hypocrisy. He'd been part of the traffic jam. He'd summited despite the overcrowding. Why didn't he turn back? Purja's response: "I'm a professional mountaineer. Everest is part of my job. But I also have a responsibility to document what's happening. That photo, that's the truth. And people needed to see it." Purja used his platform to advocate for change, but he also acknowledged one photo isn't enough. We need systemic change, and that requires governments, companies, and climbers all agreeing that safety matters more than profit, and I'm not sure that'll ever happen. The photo's legacy. The traffic jam photo is now one of the most iconic images in mountaineering history. It's used in educational materials about overcrowding and environmental impact, ethics courses about risk, responsibility, and commercialization, news articles about Everest deaths, documentaries about the climbing industry. It's become a symbol, a shorthand for What's wrong with Everest? And whenever someone asks, why is Everest so dangerous? The answer is often, Google the 2019 traffic jam photo. But symbols don't save lives. And despite the photo's viral impact, despite the global outrage, despite the calls for reform, nothing has fundamentally changed. Nepal still issues hundreds of permits. Companies still take unqualified clients. Climbers still pay $100,000 to stand in line, and people still die. Because a photo can shock the world, but it can't change a system built on profit. And as long as Everest generates millions in revenue, the traffic jams will continue, the deaths will continue, and we'll keep sharing photos, expressing outrage, and doing nothing. This is the question everyone asks when they hear about the 2019 traffic jam. Why didn't people just turn back? When climbers saw the line, hundreds of people queued on a narrow ridge. Why didn't they immediately descend? When they realized they'd be waiting 2 to 4 hours in the death zone, burning through oxygen, risking their lives, why didn't they abandon the summit attempt? The answer is complex. Psychological, economic, physiological, and deeply human. Reason 1. Sunk cost. Fallacy. Climbers who reached the traffic jam had already invested $50,000, $100,000 plus in expedition costs, 1 to 2 years of training. 2 months on the mountain, acclimatizing, weeks of physical and mental suffering. Turning back meant accepting that all of that investment was wasted, and humans are psychologically wired to avoid accepting losses. This is called the sunk cost fallacy. The tendency to continue investing in something because you've already invested so much, even when continuing, is irrational. Climbers reported thinking, I've spent $100,000. I'm not leaving without summiting. I've trained for 2 years. This is my only chance. I'm so close. Just a few more hours. And these thoughts overrode rational risk assessment. Because turning back felt like failure, like quitting, like admitting defeat. Reason 2. Social pressure. Climbers weren't alone. They were surrounded by hundreds of others. And when everyone around you is continuing despite the danger, it's psychologically difficult to turn back. This is called conformity bias, the tendency to follow the group, even when the group is making bad decisions. Climbers reported thinking, everyone else is waiting. If I turn back, I'll look weak. My teammates are continuing. I can't abandon them. If I'm the only one who quits, what does that say about me? And this pressure was compounded by the presence of guides and Sherpas. If the professionals were continuing, surely it was safe, right? It wasn't. Reason 3. Summit fever. Summit fever is a psychological condition where climbers become obsessed with reaching the summit, ignoring warning signs, safety protocols, and rational decision-making. It's caused by hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, impairs judgment, making irrational decisions seem reasonable. Tunnel vision. Focus narrows to a single goal, summit, at the expense of everything else. Ego. The belief that you're stronger, smarter, more capable than others who've failed. Climbers with summit fever report experiencing detachment from reality. It didn't feel dangerous. I felt invincible. Rationalization. I can handle this. I'm strong enough. Denial. Those delays won't affect me. I'll be fine. And summit fever is particularly dangerous because the person experiencing it doesn't realize they're impaired. They genuinely believe their decisions are rational. Reason 4. Overconfidence in guides. Many climbers in the 2019 traffic jam were clients on guided expeditions. They'd paid companies to get them to the summit safely, and they trusted their guides to make good decisions. But guides face conflicting pressures: professional obligation, keep clients safe, economic pressure. High summit success rates attract more clients. Client expectations. Clients who've paid $100,000 expect to summit, and when a guide tells a client, "The line is long, but we'll wait it out, we'll be fine," the client trusts that assessment, even if it's wrong, even if it's motivated by financial pressure rather than safety. Reason 5. Poor risk assessment. Most climbers lack the experience to accurately assess risk at extreme altitude. They know intellectually that the death zone is dangerous, but they don't viscerally understand what dangerous means. Standing in line for 3 hours at sea level, annoying but harmless. Standing in line for 3 hours at 28,000 feet, potentially fatal. But if you've never experienced the death zone, you don't know that. You think, I've waited in lines before. I can handle this. And by the time you realize you can't handle it, by the time your oxygen is depleted, your body is shutting down, your brain is failing, it's too late to turn back safely. Reason 6. Optimism bias. Humans are optimistic. We believe bad things happen to other people, not to me. Climbers saw people collapsing in line, saw bodies being stepped over, and thought, that won't happen to me. I'll be fine. I'm prepared. This is called optimism bias, the tendency to believe you're less likely than others to experience negative outcomes. And it kills, because the mountain doesn't care how optimistic you are. It kills the confident just as easily as the afraid. Reason 7. Hypoxia impairs judgment. This is the physiological explanation. Above 26,000 feet, your brain is oxygen deprived. This impairs executive function, ability to plan, assess risk, make complex decisions, impulse control, ability to resist immediate desires like summiting, self-awareness, ability to recognize your own impairment. A climber standing in the traffic jam, hypoxic and exhausted, is not capable of rational decision-making. They may genuinely believe continuing is safe, not because they're stupid, but because their brain is literally malfunctioning. The uncomfortable truth. When people ask, why didn't they turn back? They're assuming the climbers were thinking clearly, but they weren't. They were oxygen deprived, hypoxic, financially invested, sunk cost fallacy, socially pressured, conformity bias, obsessively focused, summit fever, overly confident, optimism bias, physiologically impaired, brain not functioning, and in that state, turning back, the rational decision felt impossible. So they stayed irrational, they waited wrong, and some of them died. And the rest, the ones who summited and descended safely, they carry guilt, trauma, the knowledge that they made a choice that could easily have killed them, that they got lucky, that they walked past dying people, that they prioritized a mountain over human lives. Because in the death zone, rationality dies first, and once it's gone, humans make terrible decisions. And Mount Everest punishes terrible decisions. Every time. After the 2019 deaths, there were calls for sweeping reforms. Governments, climbing organizations, media outlets, and the families of the dead all demanded change. Nepal promised action. Climbing companies pledged new safety protocols, and the world watched, hoping this time would be different, but it wasn't. What Nepal promised. In June 2019, Nepal's tourism ministry announced several reforms. 1. Experience requirements. Climbers must provide proof of summiting at least one peak above 60,500 meters, 21,325 feet, before attempting Everest. 2. Fitness standards. Climbers must submit medical certificates proving they're physically fit for high-altitude climbing. 3. Liaison officers. Government officials will be stationed at base camps to monitor expeditions and enforce safety regulations. 4. Permit restrictions. Nepal will consider capping permits. These reforms sounded promising per season, but implementation was weak and enforcement was non-existent. What actually happened? Experience requirements, loosely defined and rarely verified. Climbers submit certificates from any peak above 6,500 meters, even obscure, non-technical peaks that require minimal skill, and verification is minimal. Fake certificates are common. Fitness standards. Medical certificates are easily obtained. Doctors sign off without rigorous testing. And there's no enforcement at base camp. If you arrive in Nepal with a permit, you're allowed to climb regardless of fitness. Liaison officers, stationed at base camps but with limited authority. They can't force climbers to turn back, can't revoke permits, can't shut down expeditions. They're observers, not enforcers. Permit caps, never implemented. In 2023, Nepal issued 478 permits, 97 more than the deadly 2019 season. The consideration why reforms failed. Abandonment. The answer is simple: money. Nepal's government depends on climbing permit revenue. Everest permits generate over $11 million annually. For a nation with limited resources and widespread poverty, this revenue is critical. Capping permits would cost millions, so Nepal won't do it. And climbing companies oppose reforms because stricter requirements reduce their client base. If only experienced climbers could attempt Everest, companies would lose 50 to 70% of their business, so they lobby against meaningful reforms. And clients oppose reforms because they want access. If Everest required legitimate high-altitude experience, most wealthy amateurs would be excluded, so they pressure companies and governments to keep the gates open. The result? No one with power wants real reform, so nothing changes. What climbing companies promised? After 2019, several major expedition companies announced new safety protocols. 1. Mandatory turnaround times. Clients who don't reach the summit by 1 p.m. must descend immediately. 2. Oxygen reserves. All clients must carry extra oxygen tanks for emergencies. 3. Sherpa-to-client ratios. 1 Sherpa for every 2 to 3 clients. Pre-climb assessments. 4 to 5. Clients must demonstrate competence on smaller peaks before attempting Everest. But these protocols are voluntary. Companies that enforce them lose business to companies that don't. And in a competitive market, safety is a disadvantage. By 2023, most companies had abandoned or weakened these protocols. Turnaround times are suggestions rather than rules. Oxygen reserves are recommended but not required. And pre-climb assessments are minimal. What the climbing community promised, the mountaineering community, climbers, guides, organizations pledged to: 1. Self-regulate. Experienced climbers would refuse to climb during overcrowded seasons. 2. Advocate for permits caps. Lobby Nepal to limit permits. 3. Support Sherpa rights. Push for better pay, insurance, and working conditions for Sherpas. But self-regulation doesn't work, because the climbers willing to self-regulate are not the problem. The problem is inexperienced clients who don't know better and companies that prioritize profit. And advocacy? Minimal impact. Nepal listens to money, not activists. The 2023 season, proof nothing changed. In 2023, 4 years after the deadly traffic jam, Nepal issued 478 permits, more than 2019. The reforms had failed, or more accurately, they'd never been seriously attempted. Continued. 17 deaths in 2023, matching 2019's toll. Multiple traffic jams reported Sherpas continuing to bear disproportionate risk. Clients continuing to climb without adequate experience. The Everest industry learned nothing, because there was no incentive to learn. The deaths generate bad press for a few weeks, then the news cycle moves on, and clients keep paying, keep climbing, keep dying. Why real reform is impossible? Real reform would require permit caps at 200 per season. Nepal loses $2 million annually. 2. Strict experience requirements. Companies lose 70% of clients. 3. Infrastructure improvements. Widen routes, install more fixed ropes, build emergency shelters. Costs millions with no clear funding source. 4. Mandatory insurance for Sherpas. Companies. Costs enforcement mechanisms, government officials with authority to stop dangerous climbs. Nepal would need to hire, train staff. Every solution costs money, and no one wants to pay. Nepal won't sacrifice revenue, companies won't sacrifice profit, and clients won't sacrifice access. So the system stays broken because fixing it is expensive, and letting people die is cheap. The uncomfortable question: should Everest be closed to commercial climbing entirely? Yes. Everest should be reserved for elite mountaineers. Commercial climbing has destroyed it. The only way to prevent deaths is to ban inexperienced climbers. Others argue no. Climbing Everest is a human right. Anyone willing to accept the risks should be allowed. Banning commercial climbing would devastate Nepal's economy and Sherpa livelihoods. There's no consensus and no willingness to make the hard choice. So the traffic jams continue. The deaths continue. And every few years, a viral photo reminds the world Everest is broken and we're all complicit. Because we watch, we judge, we share photos of the dead, but we don't demand real change. We don't boycott companies. We don't pressure governments. We just move on until the next disaster, the next traffic jam, the next 11 deaths, and then we repeat the cycle. Outrage, empty promises. Nothing changes, and the mountain keeps killing. Because that's what mountains do. It's 2025, 6 years since the deadly traffic jam, and nothing has fundamentally changed. Nepal issued 478 permits in 2023. Numbers are projected to exceed 500 in 2025. The traffic jams continue, the deaths continue, and the world has stopped paying attention. Because Everest deaths are no longer shocking, they're expected. Routine. Part of the business model. The families still grieve. The families of the 11 who died in 2019 are still fighting, still demanding accountability, still asking, why did no one stop this? Pushpa Devi, Ravi Thakur's mother, has become an activist. She travels to Nepal annually, protesting outside government offices, demanding permit caps. She's met with sympathetic officials who promise change. And then nothing happens. They tell me, we're so sorry for your loss. We'll do better, Pushpa says. But they're lying. They don't care about my son. They care about money, and my son's life was worth less than $11,000, the cost of one permit. The Sherpas still suffer. Sherpa deaths continue at disproportionate rates. In 2023, 17 people died on Everest. 6 were Sherpas, and their deaths received minimal media coverage. Yangchen Sherpa, Gyaltsen's widow, struggles to support her 2 children. The compensation she received, $15,000 from insurance, has nearly run out. She works multiple jobs, and she's terrified her sons will become guides, following their father into the same deadly industry. I tell them, don't climb, Yangchen says. But what choice do they have? Guiding is the only way to earn money here, so they'll climb, and maybe they'll die, just like their father. The companies, still profit expedition companies, continue to thrive. In 2023, the top companies reported record revenues. They market Everest as achievable for anyone with determination. They promise 90% summit success rates, inflated. They downplay risks, criminally, and clients keep signing up. Because Everest is a status symbol, a bucket list item, a story to tell at dinner parties. I summited Everest sounds impressive. I waited 3 hours in a traffic jam at 28,000 feet and almost died. Sounds less impressive. So the marketing works, and the money flows. The government still prioritizes revenue. Nepal's tourism ministry released a statement in 2024. Everest is safe. The reforms implemented after 2019 have significantly improved safety. This is a lie. Permits have increased, deaths continue, and no meaningful reforms have been implemented. But the lie serves a purpose. It reassures clients, protects the industry, and justifies continued permit issuance. The climbers still come in. May 2024, another traffic jam formed at the Hillary Step. Over 150 people queued on the same narrow ridge. 3 people died waiting in line. The photos circulated on social media. People expressed outrage. News outlets ran stories. And within a week, the world had moved on, because we've seen this before. The traffic jams, the deaths, the outrage, the empty promises. It's a cycle. and we're numb to it now. The mountain
doesn't care. Mount Everest is indifferent. It doesn't care about permits, protests, or reforms. It doesn't care about families, Sherpas, or clients. It just exists, cold, eternal, indifferent, and it keeps taking. Every season, every summit attempt, every traffic jam. The 11 who died in 2019 are not the last. They're just the most famous, because their deaths coincided with a viral photo. But dozens of others have died since, and dozens more will die, because the system is designed to kill, not intentionally, but inevitably. As long as hundreds of people queue on a mountain that can only handle dozens, as long as profit matters more than safety, as long as clients prioritize ego over survival, the traffic jam will never end. The deaths will never stop, and Mount Everest will keep doing what it's always done, taking and keeping and killing, one climber at a time, in a line, waiting their turn to die on top of the world.